Today we're going to talk about how to properly clean gravestones. The first rule of cleaning headstones is do no harm. So before you ever begin, you want to evaluate the conditions and never use any harmful products. That includes using bleach, Clorox, any type of wire brushes, and any power tools of any kind. Even if the bleach says it is for outdoor use, it is still a harmful substance to stones that are very porous, more so than most people may think. When bleach gets absorbed into the stones, when the salts settle, it erodes the stone from the inside out. These are different results of having used bleach to clean gravestones. You can see the significant cracks down the side here. This is also an infant stone that the face of the stone is literally crumbling off. You can see in the creases where the top portion of the stone, where it was smooth, has completely eroded off and it is crumbling apart. Sadly, there is no reversing this. So depending on how much was used and if it is ever used again, the stone will just continue to crumble. Signs that graves have been cleaned with bleach is obviously going to be whitening around it, but also the yellowing of the stone later. In this photo, you can see that even the rocks around each of the stones are white, whereas most of them would have been gray. And you can see the tinge of yellow at the top of it. The photo on the right, again, you can see the yellowing on different portions of the stone, and you can see that the rocks all the way around the stone have also been bleached. So that yellowing is not going to go away. And again, it's just going to erode the stone and start to make it crumble in the future. This is a stone that I have photos of it for multiple years, and I believe it was cleaned with bleach. So the first photo is from 2011 and the second from 2016. And then in 2019, it was significantly whiter. I do not know who cleaned it, but then even though it was 2020, it wasn't quite a year later, you're already starting to see dark black spots come up. And where it had been repaired is significantly more ragged, where it is probably corroding that stone. These are more pictures of that yellowing. So you can see on ledger stones, the water is typically going to pool in certain parts of the stone, and that's usually what causes them to appear that dark color. But here, somebody cleaned the stone with bleach and they did not rinse it well, and so that bleach just sat there, and it has resulted in this horrible yellowing color. You can see that the curbing stone also has that on there. The picture in the right, it's a little bit harder to tell, but you can see in person that the stone, the texture is not the same everywhere. The stone is corroding and the nice polished finish is no longer there. You never want to use wire bristle brushes to clean a stone. You might think that you need something more powerful or stronger to do this, but in reality, you just need a soft bristled brush. You want to use one that you would use on your own skin. Typically a nylon bristle or natural bristles like bamboo. Think of a kitchen scrub brush. You never want to use any type of mechanical tools. This is called a nylox wheel, which has the wire brushes just in a round shape on there. And yes, it will clean it, but it is also going to make the engravings so scratched up that you won't be able to read them. This is the result of using a nylox wheel on a tombstone. You can no longer even read the inscription here. This is a stone that was cleaned using bleach, wire brushes, the nylox wheel as well, and also I believe they used a pressure washer. You never want to use a pressure washer either. You can see the many abrasions on the stone where they scrubbed it, trying to get what was causing it to be dark, but they have ended up scratching the inscriptions a great deal. And at the bottom, you can tell they have even worn away a good bit of the mortar. This photo was taken, I believe, back in 2019. And then this photo was taken in February of 2023. Again, when you use bleach to clean a stone, it will make it white kind of fast and immediate, but it also, because the stones are porous and absorb it, it makes it begin to corrode on the inside, leaving it open for more things to go inside of it. So you can barely read the inscription here any longer. You can still see the scratches from the wire brushes. It does not look like a nice new stone anymore. As I mentioned, you never want to use pressure washers. Um, the pressure washing can remove layers of the stone without you even realizing it. It may show an instant improvement where it looks clean, but long-term damage will not be able to be undone. And when you are pushing water at such a high pressure into the stone, again, that is going to break down those layers. And this should go without saying, but you don't do sandblasting as a point of cleaning gravestones either. Sandblasting is used to remove the polish off the surface of the stone, often for the purpose of creating new text, but it should never be used on older stones or for the purpose of cleaning stones. I wanted to bring this up just briefly, harmful versus safe methods for reading gravestones. Things you never want to do are put like shaving cream on a stone, powder, any kind of like baking powder. I've heard of flour. Chalk used to be used, but you don't want to do that today. If you think about it, all of these sidewalk chalks, they have almost like preservatives in them that make them last longer. They don't just rinse off the first time with water. So you don't want to put this sidewalk chalk on the stones to be able to read them. But also you don't want to press hard on these stones because many of the ones you're trying to read are going to be older. The best method for doing this is the light method, which is really taking a mirror and getting direct sunlight into the shadows of the inscription. You can also do this with a flashlight. Of course, there's Photoshop that can enhance the image. And then another method is called the foil method, where you just lightly lay over a sheet of tinfoil and lightly press it over it, which you can usually do just with a brush, and it will go into the carvings so that you can read it and photograph it easier. Again, this is just another list of harmful products that people have used for reading gravestones. I've heard some talking about peroxide, detergents, paint. Please do not paint a gravestone just so that you can read it better. Do not use any type of markers, baking powder, baking soda. Think of how all of these things react with water. It does not just rinse it, it's going to cause a chemical reaction, and you don't want any of that. These are examples of different biological growth on stones. Almost everything that makes stones appear dark is just biological growth. It can be mold, mildew, moss, lichen, different types of algae and things like that. You can see on the stone on the left, it has a type of orange, we'll say mildew growing on it. I will be honest, I have tried my hardest to figure out what type of growth this is and without any luck. So my conclusion is they were just stubborn redheads and they're stubborn red hairs coming through the stone. The stone on the right, you can see a good bit of lichen, and then it has the dark mold growing on it as well. This stone has moss growing at the bottom and also a good bit of lichen. The photo on the right has a large bit of moss, and that is actually a concrete slab. And so concrete is going to be much more porous than marble or granite. This cemetery is actually prone to flooding, and so therefore water has sat for a long time, and it enables these different growths to live there and get their roots deep into the stone. Stone on the left, you can see it is very dark. A lot of it is from pollution, or it's very close to the road, so car pollution and toxins in the air, but it could easily be cleaned. The stone on the right just has a good bit of lichen growing on it because there are many trees above it. Before you ever clean a gravestone, you need to have permission. Either get permission from the cemetery, the church, or whoever owns that property that the stone is located on. So you need to do a little bit of research before you do this. You also need permission from a direct family member or a descendant of the individual's stone that you will be cleaning. If it is someone who you are a descendant, but it is, say, a seventh great grandparent, try to see first if there is someone more closely related that you can at least let them know what you're doing. Just because they are your ancestor doesn't mean that they aren't others' ancestors as well. You also want to evaluate the condition of the stone first and decide if it actually needs to be cleaned. Not all stones are meant to be white. The composition of the stone may require a different technique of cleaning, or it just may not need to be cleaned at all. Today we see lots of bronze markers for stones, typically for military, but there's some cemeteries that only have the bronze markers. And bronze takes an entirely different cleaning method. So that's one that we're not covering in this presentation. You can have different types of stone. All of the ones that I'm going to be covering are typically marble and granite that you see down in the South. You may also find limestone, slate, sandstone, concrete, which concrete you do see often in the South as well, filled stones as well. Other materials, I mentioned bronze, but also wooden headstones, PVC piping, shells, marbles, brick. There even could be a variety of other things used for gravestones. So what do we use to clean gravestones? The number one is water, and I don't have this listed, but you want to use clean water. A soft bristled brush, soft enough to rub on your own skin. So in the picture, you can see I have just a bamboo bristled brush. I have a bottle of water, and then the D2 biological solution if it's needed. D2 cleans natural growths on the stone, such as lichen, mold, mildew, algae, and different air pollutants. It does not harm the stone in any way. It has been tested for many years, and D2 is what is used to clean the Arlington National Cemetery, the Washington monuments, the White House even. So this is a long-tested product that does no harm. All it does is stop the growth from growing. So these are just different images of the brushes. These are all bamboo bristles, and then the two over here are nylon bristles, kind of like a toothbrush. I believe I got these actually for kind of cleaning dishes. This one I really like. It has a small rubber tip at the end, which is really good for getting in those carvings that might have growth in there that you might not be able to get with a regular brush. So first steps in the process of cleaning, again, evaluate the condition of the stone and make sure that it has no structural damage. If too much pressure is applied, it could break. So always check the condition of the stone first. You never want to move or touch a cracked stone unless you are an expert and you know what you're doing, which again, you need to be trained in that. Sometimes older stones are just better left alone. Um, People often underestimate how heavy stones are. So if it has fractures in it or cracks, it is best to just leave it alone and do not touch it. And this is as much of safety as it is for preservation. If you have concluded that the stone does not need to be cleaned, but, or excuse me, does need to be cleaned, but does not need to be touched, we would use the no touch cleaning method, which I'll go over in a little bit. So the least invasive manner of cleaning is what you want to start with. If the stone simply has biological growth and buildup on it, start with the least invasive manner of cleaning. And this is basically just using clean water and a soft bristled brush. If the stone is upright, begin at the bottom and work your way up. You want to wet the stone with clean water first, and then begin scrubbing in a circular motion from the bottom up, and this prevents streaking. If the stone is quite ornamental, you may need a little bit more scrubbing and time and water. If the stone has lichen growing on it, again, just wet the stone and let the water sit for a little bit to soften the lichen. And then you can use a plastic or wooden scraper to gently scrape off the lichen. And it normally comes off with just clean water. I use paint scrapers that are plastic for this. You can get these even at the dollar store. You do want to rinse your brush often with clean water so that you're not spreading the buildup around. And of course, after scrubbing, rinse the stone again with clean water and try to make sure that no water is left pooling in the flat areas. If it is a ledger stone, you want the water to run clean when rinsing the stone. This is one that I actually just cleaned last month. So you can see the picture in the beginning, just how dark it was. This cemetery was at Ebenezer, which was a quite old grave, but interestingly, there's not as much grass here. There is a lot of sand around. And this cemetery has many, many dark stones. As you can see kind of behind it, how many of them are very dark. A lot of this is just the sand having gone up around the stone and it's sitting there when it's wet. So I simply wet the stone with water, front and back, and started scrubbing it with a soft brush. So this is the result after gently scrubbing the stone with just water. Reason I say most of the stone, I did have to stop because the weather started getting bad. Normally rain is good. It just means you have to use less water, but a thunderstorm hopped up and it was starting to lightning quite bad, so we had to leave early. But I got just a picture of it before I left. And again, that is probably 30 minutes after the rain stopped, but just water and a soft brush did that. If you're going to clean with the D2 biological solution, these are the steps for that. You want to apply the D2 with a spray bottle to completely cover the stone. Spray the stone again from the bottom to the top. Let the solution sit for at least 10 to 15 minutes. After a few minutes, you're going to start noticing the stone turn almost like a rust color. And this is just showing you that it's working. It's that interaction with the biological growth that's changing colors. After at least 10 minutes, you will begin to scrub the stone with your clean, wet, soft bristle brush. Again, begin at the bottom and work your way up. If it is a ledger stone that is flat, or like a small monument that is flat, it doesn't really matter where you start in the corners. Rinse your brush often as you scrub, and then of course rinse the stone with water. And the stone will continue to whiten with time and with the sun. So these are some examples. This is spraying the stone with the biological solution of D2. So you can see that it has started to turn that rust color around the edges. But you can see other parts where it is wet with the solution, but it's not that color because there isn't much growth there. So that interaction is only going to be on the places where there is biological growth buildup. Make sure the stone's completely covered with the solution. It will appear darker where a lot of the buildup is, and then of course it's going to have that rust color tint to it as well. Like I said, let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes before you start scrubbing it. So again, this is a ledger stone, which is completely flat, so it doesn't really matter where you start scrubbing it, but you want to do it in a circular motion and then continue to rinse your brush and start over. And you'll see the end results in a little bit. These are just different examples. This is an ancestor of mine that I was scrubbing it, and rain came up, so it rinsed it kind of halfway through, and I had to go back and do another scrub. And this was his wife. Again, you want to rinse it after you've let the D2 sit and you've scrubbed the stone. But look at that, how dark it is right here. And as I'm pouring the water on it, you can already see how white it is underneath. Now, this is a marble stone, and we could see from other portions that it was white to begin with. Some marble stones may have lots of veining in it, which the veining itself is dark. Make sure to wipe away water that may be sitting on the flat ledger stones. So here I have almost like a little sweeper broom that I'm just sweeping the excess water off of the stone. If there are inscriptions where it is very dark, you may need a little bit more scrubbing there. And again, make sure to rinse it good. After only cleaning and rinsing, you're going to see noticeable results. And again, the stone's going to continue to whiten. So this was a couple that I cleaned. I believe we cleaned the husband first, and we left the wife's stone dark because we came back a month later to do the other to see the results. So here you can see how dark this is in this corner. And we've cleaned this stone. It's still kind of dark, but it does not look nearly as bad as the one on the left. This is before and after cleaning Miss Alvaretta Register stone the same day. Again, you can see it's still a little bit dark here, but it does not look anything like it did before, and you can read the full inscription. This is the same day before and after cleaning. So this is both of those side by side. So I scrub the tops good, and I scrub the bottom as well. This was 2 months difference. So this is the one, the husband and wife that were side by side. You can barely read anything in the beginning. And so 2 months later, that is quite a difference. So this is before and after the 2 months, so you can see the full stone. And then this is a year later after we had cleaned both of these stones. You can tell what a difference that is. This was one that I thought was just tiered. It was kind of in the shape of a truncated obelisk. And after we were cleaning all of this lichen and growth off, we realized it was actually carved books up at the top and tassels all the way around the stone that were delicately carved. And you couldn't even tell that in the beginning. So this is just a month later. This is a week's difference before and after. And again, all of these were sprayed with D2, scrubbed, and then rinsed off thoroughly. This is another stone that had a great deal of growth on one side of it that was that orange growth. Again, I joked that it must have been a stubborn redhead. So it was quite large, and then you can see 1 week later how clean that stone is. And we worked for over an hour and a half scrubbing that stone very well. This is another one before and after. This is only a short time afterwards, and so the stone is still wet, and that's the reason it still looks a little bit dark. This is 1 week's difference. Here I was at Ebenezer again last month, and we sprayed the stone on the left with the D2 solution. We left it on there for about 10 to 15 minutes and came back and scrubbed it. So I just did a light scrubbing, and again, it started to rain, so I didn't get to to come back and do more, but just a light scrubbing with the D2 solution, and 1 week later, look at the difference of that. The one on the right had been cleaned previously. So now we're going to go over the no-touch cleaning method. You want to use this process if the stone does need to be cleaned, but is damaged and does not need to be touched. For this, you're simply going to spray the stone with the D2 biological solution from the bottom to the top, completely covering the stone. Make sure to get all sides of it when it's upright. You'd be surprised the amount of stones that actually have some inscription on the back of them and people just don't realize it. So make sure to get the back of the stone as well. The solution will slowly work to kill the biological growth on the stone and whiten it over time with the help of the sun. So you don't need to rinse it in this case. So this was a stone that I sprayed with D2 in 2019. It was in a socket, which the socket is the base, but it was leaning quite badly and it was loose. In other words, it was moving when I tried to see if it was steady. So I did not want to move it. Sadly, the stone, when I came back almost 3 years later, it had fallen and broken. But you can see the result of just spraying the stone with the D2. You can read the full inscription. These were some stones that were done where the D2 was only sprayed along the inscription. So these are about 4 months apart, so you can see that. Since then, we have sprayed and cleaned the full stones, but these are just showing you what the solution can do by itself. So these are 3 of them side by side where we had sprayed the darkest spots on them. This is my second great-grandmother who I had sprayed the stone and scrubbed it, and I've actually done 2 treatments, but it was extremely dark. I have cleaned it once since then, and it's just one that is taking a lot longer. The stone is not completely level, and so when it rains, the water tends to sit and pool in this area. This one was sprayed with D2 and lightly scrubbed, so that's almost a year's difference. These were stones that, again, the water pooled where the inscription was badly, so we sprayed the inscription. So you can see the difference that it has done. Here, only spraying on the names and no scrubbing. So that's just showing that difference. And then these are stones that I have cleaned. This was the same day cleaning it at the Bruton Cemetery. And then this is 6 months later. So you can tell that is quite a difference. Again, same day cleaning. You can still see where there's some water that hasn't fully dried. This was a marble stone that had been upright but must have broken, and the family's method of repairing it was to lay the marble stone in concrete for it to sit around it. So, and it was under a tree, so there was lots of sap from the tree that had fallen, and you could barely read a word on it. So now you can read the full inscription. This is showing the full marker. So the D2 solution can also clean concrete as well. In the South, you may find cemeteries that are often just concrete slabs. This is one of the examples of a stone that will probably require more cleanings in the future because it is up under a tree that had sap that falls down, and that's just an environmental thing that unless you cut the tree down, it's going to continue to happen. This is another example of a stone, and 6 months later, you can see just how different that looks. This is a photo from the same day. The stone is still slightly wet. You can kind of see where I had my little plastic paint scraper because all of this on the edges was lichen that was growing on it. And you can see that it's almost a little discolored, and you're going to notice that from lichen because the roots get into the stone. This is the same day cleaning this stone at the Bruton Cemetery. and then 6 months after cleaning. So look at that difference. And again, it was sprayed with the D2 solution, scrubbed, and rinsed thoroughly. Same day cleaning. This is Burnt Church Cemetery. This stone, you could tell somebody had sprayed something with it. It had streaks all over it, and it had a great deal of lichen. But this is one that we actually cleaned just with water and a soft brush. And again, another example of one cleaned just with water and a brush, no solution. So you always want to test it with water first and just see if that might help. Here you can see that, again, there had been a good bit of lichen on there, and so that is still going to be discolored a little bit from that, but over time it'll slowly get whiter. This is a ledger stone that is tomb above ground, and again there were trees over it, so you can see a good bit of the sap after spraying it, and it's got that rust color to it. This is a year later, so you can still read the inscription, whereas to begin with it was so dark you couldn't read it, and it's still slowly getting lighter. This is another one at the Burnt Church Cemetery. This is the front of one of the stones we saw earlier, where you can see kind of spray marks or something someone had done, and we just cleaned this with water and a soft brush. It looks like someone maybe had used chalk on this stone to just cover the inscription so they could maybe get a photo of it. And so you can see what chalk can do to a stone. And so we scrubbed this one good as well. This is 1 year's difference after only spraying the stone with the D2 solution. This obelisk was quite tall, taller than me, and so a coworker of mine, we went and we just sprayed the stone completely because we could barely reach the top of it. We did no scrubbing, and a year later, this is how good it was looking. 3 months after cleaning, you can see that this one was quite dark, and because the marble joins in the middle, this is where water pools badly when it rains. So this stone is probably going to need a second cleaning in the future. This is in Swainsboro, and this one was cleaned same afternoon. You can just see the difference. And these are just the marblings that are natural marbling in the stone, or veining, excuse me. This one is also in Swainsboro that we cleaned with the solution. The lichen came off easily with water, but then it did have a good bit of growth from being near trees, so that needed a good scrubbing. This is one at Eastside the same afternoon. This stone, I actually, when I first saw it, I thought it was an adult because it was larger than most infant stones, but it turned out to be a toddler. I believe she was about 3 years old when she passed, and it was sitting off to the side. So I have not been able to find any family members of hers, but it's one of the earliest stones at this cemetery. In conclusion, always have permission before you clean a gravestone for the property where the stone is and of a person who is either a relative or descendant of that individual stone. Evaluate the condition of the stone and make sure that it actually needs to be cleaned. Be mindful of the type of stone you're cleaning, so make sure you know the proper technique. Do no harm. But when you clean the gravestone, do not use bleach, wire brushes, power tools, pressure washer, anything like that. And remember that sometimes less is more. So not all stones need to be thoroughly cleaned at one time. Simply spraying the stone with D2 and letting the sun do the rest is better sometimes. And also, of course, try the water and a soft brush first and see if that will do the trick. These are websites for more information. The Cemetery Conservators for United Standards is a wonderful website that can tell you about all the different practices for cleaning, what treatments work, what treatments are they're still testing. and which ones you should not use. And they have lots of pictures. The cleaning practices will answer questions. They will also show you how to clean different types of gravestones. They have places for repairing stones, reading stones, identification of them, how they weather, safety, and different methods for doing almost anything related to cemeteries and gravestones. So it's a wonderful site. And that is it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Thank you.